Today we're going to be exploring on how to migrate a virtual machine from the on-premises VMware data center to the Azure infrastructure. Before we go any further, let me show you our current on-premises infrastructure. We have a single data center that consists of a physical Active Directory domain controller, has few users set up there. We also have two ESXi hosts, host 1 and host 2, that are controlled by vSphere server. Host 1 has our IIS virtual machine, that is Windows 2019 server. This virtual machine will be migrated to Azure. The other ESXi host 2 has Windows 10 machine, which we're going to be using for testing. So at the end of our migration, our IIS server will be shut down on ESXi host 1, and it will be fully functional in the Azure infrastructure. So once that will be done, then we're going to just change a pointer on our domain controller to point our www record on the DNS side to the new IP address which we're going to be receiving from the Azure infrastructure. So let's look at some of the steps we're going to be performing. On the Azure side, we're going to create Azure Migrate project. Once that is done, then we're going to discover VMs using Azure Appliance, which we're going to set up on our VMware data center. Then we're going to perform assessment of VMs just to find out what would be the cost of running that IIS server in the Azure infrastructure. And then we're going to migrate VM to Azure. So let's look at our Azure subscription. We just subscribe with a new subscription. There's no resources deployed there. On our local VMware data center, we have a single data center with a single cluster that is comprised of two ESXi hosts. Host 1, as we said, has our IIS server, and host 2 has Windows 10 machine, which we're going to be using for testing. Our IIS server just has a basic test page there, which we're gonna just display for testing purposes, right? So because it's a local record on the local domain controller, once we click on the site on the test page, it displays locally. So before we go any further, let's create a resource. First of all, we need to create a resource group. Let's click on the left side and then click on resource groups and then create a resource group. We're gonna call it Migrate Test resource group. So we're gonna put it in our West region, US West region. We're gonna review and create, and we're gonna create it. Those resource groups are very quickly created. So now we are ready to create a resource, right? So we're gonna create a VNet, right? Virtual network. So we're going to put it in that resource group. We're going to call it Migrate Test VLAN, right? So we're going to choose an IP address, and instead of the default right here, we're going to call front web 0, right? So that's a 0 VLAN. So we're going to create front web 0, and then we're going to go to next security. Everything we're going to leave by default. We're going to review, and then we're going to create. So once that VLAN is being created, we're going to actually go back to our home dashboard, and on the bottom, as we can see, there is a link here, very helpful, Azure Migration Tools. We're going to click on that, and then we're going to click on the first option, Discover and Do Assessment. We're going to create a project. We're going to put a resource group, right? We're going to call it Migrate Test, and then geography, United States. So once that one is created, in the meantime, okay, so go to the resource group. Okay, so let's refresh. So there should be one VLAN, and on the home screen, Migration Tools. Okay, so this is our Migrate Test project. Let's click on Discover. That's the first step in discovering our infrastructure of all the VMs on our VMware vSphere hypervisor. So we're going to select the first option, and then we're going to name okay, so we're going to call it so Migrate. Generate a key. So while the key is being generated, I'm not going to download over a template because already we downloaded it early. So while the key is being generated in the background, we're going to use downloaded over template. So we're going to go back to our vCenter. We're going to select the second host, and then on the Actions menu, we're going to deploy over template. We're going to click on the local files, and then we're going to use the downloaded template. Gonna go next. Virtual machines name we can just remove, so it's a little bit easier. 3, and then once that is done, compatibility check will be completed, so we can go to the next step, and then we can power on the virtual machine. The virtual machine actually going to be Windows Server 2016, so we're gonna go next, and then we can select a secondary storage, and then select the VM network, and then finish. The import is going to take a little time to do, so it's importing, I think the file size altogether is about 12 gigabyte, 12.9, about 13 gigabyte. So it will take a little time to upload it, but it's, as you can see, it's already going forward. So we already got our, so let's record our appliance name and put it right here in our notepad, as well as our key right here. So let's put it right here. Okay, so that's our key. Like we said, we don't need to download it. Let's see our progress. It's about 5%. So let me pause recording for a moment, and then we can continue once it is uploaded. All right, as we can see, now deployment of the template was done. So let's look at the VMs. Our Azure Migration VM is turned off. So let's power it on and connect to the console and just see what we can do. Okay, so let's see, it's powering on. Okay, so launch. Oh, so here we are. This is 2016 appliance, so we're gonna just use our password to create a new one. So I'm gonna finalize the settings. Once that is done, we're gonna go back. Okay, so we're gonna go back to the login. So once that is set up, the screen should automatically populate with steps needed to set up our connection point and bring in the connection and put our information to Migrate. So let's open it up a little bigger. So we're gonna accept the terms of use, and then it will automatically start checking connectivity to Azure, time if it was synchronized, and then we're gonna before we go forward, this particular string is pretty long. This particular string is pretty long, so what we're gonna do, in order for us to use copy and paste, we're going to use remote desktop session. So I'm going to pause actually I don't need to pause, so let me enable remote desktop session. So we're going to go to control panel and then use system right here, and then remote settings. I think it should be enabled by default. The only thing we need to know is the IP address. I pconfig just to see the IP address 104. So let me try to log in using 104. So 104. Okay, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna use workgroup and administrator, and then we're gonna use the password that we just created when we deploy the appliance. So we're gonna say yes, and here we are. So we can use copy and paste in order for us to use and paste that string that we created on the Azure side, right? So this is our string that we created on the Azure side. So we're gonna copy, and then we're gonna paste it here as a plain text, and then we're gonna verify. Key had been verified, and then we're gonna test the auto update. It might take up to 5 minutes, so I'm gonna pause the video and I'm gonna return back once it's done. Okay, so the key had been verified. Now we're gonna log in using our admin credentials on the Azure side. So I'm gonna pause it a little bit and I'm gonna go through the login steps, and then I will return back just in a moment. So we had signed in, there was a code provided, so we had signed in using our credentials, administrative credentials. So it will take a few minutes for the appliance to complete the process right here. So so that it will be registered on the Azure side. So once that one will be completed, we will return back. Alright, so the appliance now had been successfully registered. So the only thing is remaining. Apparently there's VMware Virtual Disk Development Kit is not installed. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna download and we're gonna install it. So we're gonna download it now. That is for Windows, and then once we log in and download it, we will go back to show the screen. So here we are. We're going to accept the terms and conditions, and we're going to download. We're going to open the folder, downloads folder, and then we're going to reference the location of this folder. So we're going to extract the files, and we're going to put them there. So we're going to open a new file explorer, and then we're going to navigate there. Okay, Virtual Development Kit. So what we have to do, we have to extract files here, extract, and once the files are extracted, we're gonna just move them over to this particular location. So this is basically where the files needs to be located, right? So on the VMware on the local. So we're gonna verify. So now it says it's installed. So we're going to add credentials for our vCenter server, vCenter server appliance, username. So we're going to take a record. So here we are, provided a friendly name. We're going to save the credentials, right, for our vCenter server, and then add discovery service. That's our IP address of our server, 168.1.4. And we're going to map the credentials, so we're going to save it. So the system is going to validate it in the background. Okay, it was validated. So now we're going to add the credentials for our discovery of our VM machines. So we're going to use domain credentials. So we're going to put our domain servers, domain name, allit.local, that's our domain name. The username is administrator, and that's our password. So we're gonna save. Okay, so it complained, we're gonna call it domain servers. We're gonna save. Sometimes validation failed, so let's try to revalidate the credentials. So if it happens this way, the reason why, because the DNS server is not finding this is domain. So all we have to do is open Control Panel on this appliance, go to Network and Sharing Center, open our Ethernet settings, disable version 6, and then on version 4, let's put our main domain controller as our DNS server. 168.1.10. So we're gonna say okay, close, and we're gonna revalidate credentials. Okay, validation successful. So we're gonna click Start Discovery. So it will take a little time depends on how many of course VMs do you have there in the system. But once the discovery is finished, then there will be a message displayed right here saying that the log message can be found in another place. So let's wait a little bit. In the meantime, let me bring us back to our portal right here, Azure portal. Once the refreshment is done and the discovery is completed, the information will be posted here, and the discovered VMs, we will be able to see the discovered VMs. So I'm going to pause the video right now and go back once it's ready. So as we can see right now, because Appliance was already deployed right on the vCenter server, we can see one single appliance, but the discovered server's information is not yet posted. So I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to go back to the results once they are ready. Alright, we are back, and seems like the discovery had been finished. Let's go back to our appliance to confirm. Yes, you see there is no more like spinning circle right here, so everything had been completed. As we can see, the report had been generated already. So let's go to our Azure portal and see. So we have two Linux machines, which is basically vCenter server itself and the appliance that we actually there is another one there. So let's look at our discovered servers. Alright, so as we can see, software inventory, credentials not available. As we can see, our IIS server is right here. For some reason it says credentials not available, but anyhow we have discovered our server. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna create an assessment for that server. So we're gonna select it, and then we're gonna create Azure VMware assessment server discovered from West US 2. So let's change the assessment settings. So let's select, we're not going to do reserved, no reserved instance. So let's select all performance based. Okay, so let's try to put it in our West. I think we selected US. I think all our resources is West US. Okay, so let's select all. Okay, reserved instance, no reserved instance. Okay, so performance based, pay as you go. Let's go. So we're gonna select server licenses. Already yes, so we can select that option just for now. I think next select service to assess. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna create IIS assessment. So assessment name, create a new name. So we're gonna IIS group. Okay. Alright, appliance name, and we're gonna select our server. We're gonna click next. Alright, and then we're gonna create an assessment. So let's see what are the options that will be available. So it will take a little bit of time to validate and create an assessment. Once that will be done, I'm gonna pause the video right now. Once that is done, I'm gonna return back. Alright, so now the assessment had been completed. We have a total of one assessment, so let's click on that and let's see our IIS assessment of one VM. So based on our assessment, the monthly cost estimate is going to be about $73, right? And the storage cost is about $6, right, per month. That will be the estimate, right? So once that is done, the assessment is done, then we are ready to actually perform a replication, right? So we're going to replicate servers. We're going to click on replication right here. And we're going to select VMware Appliance. Okay, so this is the appliance that we deployed there. right? Virtual machines. So we're gonna apply migration, select a group. That's our group assessment from the assessment, right? So we're gonna select that, our IIS machine. So we're gonna put it in our West US region, so the one that we have all our resources put in. Virtual network is the network we created. That's a front web. That's our zero network. Availability, no infrastructure redundancy there. So we're gonna encryption, virtual network. Okay, in the subnet. So we're gonna select yes. I'm gonna select yes. Just for the moment of time, that should be fine. So okay, automatically select VM size based on performance, match your configuration. Oh, yeah, it can happen that Azure VM size might be missing in that particular region. So we're going to go back and we're going to reconfigure it. I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to go back. So we are back. What we had to do, we had to actually create a new resource group and put it in Central US. We created a virtual network there and then the subnet. For this particular scenario, we're not going to use availability zone. Availability zone I use just for redundancy, right? For this particular case, we're not going to use it. And then we're going to select virtual network, our created virtual network, and then front web, and then we have a server license. We're going to say yes, confirm to the settings. And then on the next scenario, you see the source VM 1 core, it doesn't find the available one, so we just selected the closest one because the rest is just too low on the resources. So we're going to select 2 cores and 4 GB of RAM. We're going to go to next, and then disk to replicate. We're going to select all disks, standard hard drive. We're gonna go next. We're not gonna put a tag on those ones, and then we're gonna replicate. So during the replication, they're gonna be a key vault created, right? Azure Service Bus created, storage account, right? Local storage account. There is no replication that's being deployed in the backend. So once that will be completed, then we're gonna I'm gonna pause the video, and once that is completed, I'm gonna go back and just show the results of that, because the replication does not actually do a complete move of the VM or the data. Is just does create all these necessary resources and prepares the kind of back end to receive the VM and actually start uploading all the information back. So I'm gonna pause the video, and we're gonna return back once this process is completed. Alright, so here we are doing migration. We actually had to specify manual settings there. So there is migration is in the process right now, and it just started. So the process is happening in the back end. So I'm gonna pause the video and I'm gonna go back so that we can see the results of the replication. So now it says associate replication policy is in progress. So it's already set up. And then once that will be completed, then we can actually see the progress. So I'm going to pause the video for a moment. So we are monitoring the progress of it. It is now at the stage of start replication. It's in progress. The item that is being migrated is IIS server. So I'm going to pause the video and we're going to come back. So here we are. We refresh our project, and as we can see on the bottom side, discovered servers 6, still the same, and then replicating servers, 1 server is being replicated. So fetching information there. So initial sync, healthy. So we click on that and just see. You see it says initial replication is queued. So it will take a few minutes for it to actually start the initial stages of replication. So the target VM size, we just select the standard B2S, right, with solid state drives, which is for now, should be fine. So I'm going to be refreshing this particular page, and I'm going to pause the video in the meantime, and once the progress is started, then I'm going to turn back the video. Thank you. So things are prepared in the backend. Their storage accounts are already created, and I'm going to demonstrate it to you. So Migrate Central US, right, there's disk storage that is already prepared, and then within VLAN there's also some more things that are there. So let me go back to our resource group. So resource groups, and that is Central US. As we can see, there's disk and the storage information that is available there. So in our original test US, there's also some vault storage account and key vault that's being generated, and those ones are actually generated once we deployed that over Appliance. So I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to return back once the progress of initial replication is being accomplished. All right, the initial replications went from the status queued to 0%. So now once everything had been prepared in the backend, now there is initial sync that's happening, so the information is being transmitted back and forth, even though the VM IaaS server is still intact, right? So it's still functional, right? All the information is there. We can see the website, right? So all it.us is still there. So add, close, oops. So let's see why it is not happening. So let's go back to our network settings and just see if there is something that is being there. And the properties, TCP/IP, yeah, our domain controller is there. So what we need to do, we need to internet options, and so delete browsing history. So delete, and let's see if we can just localhost. Oops, localhost. All right, so localhost is still running. Everything is running. So let's go back to our Windows 10 machine and just see on the Windows 10 machine. So the server is still available, is still running, and also what we can do, we can issue continual ping. Okay, local. So I think it timed out because probably the firewall had been not disabled. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna go to Windows Defender Firewall, and oh, that's the problem, on the main networks is not connected. Okay, so we're gonna turn off Defender Firewall on both sides. Okay, just for illustration purposes. So now it's all, I just wanted to illustrate that there is no disruption to the server while the migration, actually the initial replication is happening. So computer network, those properties, and then the disks, you see 90 gigabyte, so it's gonna try to pull the information in. So let's see how it's gonna start. So there is no disruption. You see the response time is very, very good. There is no lost packets, there is nothing, no disruption in the back end. So I'm going to pause the video, and then once the initial replication is done, I'm going to turn the video back on. It didn't take that long. It is now initial replication 19% is completed. So let me refresh and just see how much is already done. So it's still 19%. So I'm going to pause the video and come back when it is finished. All right, as we can see, the initial Delta sync had been performed. Now we can actually do a test migration. So it didn't take that long. I just wanted to kind of also point out VM ID had been just IP address, right, of the local VM plus the characters that Azure had added. So let's try to do a test migration, right? So we're gonna migrate it to front web, to our subnet, so to the network interface that is located in the subnet, and we're gonna perform a test migration. So starting a test migration, so it's gonna take a few minutes preparing for test migration in the background. Prerequisite check had been done. In the meantime, let's go back to our portal right there, to Azure Migration Tools and to our project, and see as our replicating servers, right, the health. So we are right there in the process. So let's go back and see the progress. So I'm gonna pause the video and return back once the creating test virtual machine and starting test virtual machine is done. So it's actually not gonna completely shut down the old virtual machine, and as we can see on our test VM, so while the test migration happens, the ping is still had not been paused. So they had been, so it had been continuously available while the migration is in progress. So I'm gonna pause the video for a moment, and we're gonna return back. Alright, so Azure Migrate now did delta sync. Health is healthy. So let's see if we can perform everything. Test cleanup is pending. So the only thing we have to do right now is clean up test migration, right? So we're gonna clean up. Let me pause the video for a moment. Alright, so here is our VM. So once we are done testing, everything seems to be running on the VM itself. All the information is correct. We assign a public IP address as well there. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna go back to the Home tab, and then we're gonna go to Azure Migration Tool, Server and Databases, and we're gonna look at our projects once again. So we already replicating the server, everything is done. So we're gonna clean up test migration and then testing it. Okay, so test migration cleanup. Once that one is done, then we're gonna be ready to do the actual migration. So what will happen is that the VM will be migrated in the back end, and then the on-premises one will be shut down, and then the one will be available in the Azure. So I'm going to pause the video for a little bit, and then we're going to return back. Alright, so we are ready to migrate. The cleanup had been completed. Everything, there was all the status was healthy. There was no issues. Now we are ready to migrate. Shut down the virtual machine, perform a planned migration with no data loss. We're going to say yes. So starting migration. So let's see the progress. So shut down the virtual machine. So let's see on our so we had been logged out. So let's see if we can bring it back up. Alright, as we can see, the Azure infrastructure did shut down the server. So let's go back to the server itself. The server is no longer available. So let's go to our virtualization infrastructure and see that our IaaS server is actually in off condition. So preparing for migration is in progress. So it took only few seconds, I guess, to shut down, and then now it is in progress. So just a little note, all the information had already been kind of there. So if we go to our resource group, right, so the information, as you can see, this is VM2, this is another VM that we had just created, but there was another resource that had been put together. So on the resource group, I think all the information as far as our migration project had been already kind of stored there. So right now what is happening in the back end is the system is trying to kind of do the last changes and then start uploading. And then once the virtual machine is done, then we will be able to connect to it and just confirm everything had been transferred. I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to come back when it's ready. As we can see, I went to the resource group that's going to host our virtual machine, and as we can see, there's already temporary resources created. There's network interface, there's a disk, there's also operating system disk as well that is created. And I think as the time progresses, it's gonna complete the process. So let's go to Azure Migrate and then replicating. So migration in progress. So it's still kind of going in full progress. So it will take a little time. So we recommend start the actual migration, I guess, during the off hours, because it's going to take some time. Just depends on the size of your VMs. But if everything is successful, then you should be able to see your VM up and running in Azure. So I'm going to pause the video and come back as it's going to complete. Alright, as we can see, it didn't take that long. I guess the preparation work was taking some time, but the information was already mostly in Azure. So migrated servers, so we have one migrated servers and we have test migrated servers. So if we click on this particular link, it will give us more information. There was no issues. The end time okay, the end time was completed, the migration was done. Now let's go to our resource group, to our dashboard, and our resource group, which is Migrate Central US. Let's go out of here. So and see our, by default, as we can see, there is no public IP address, so we're gonna assign public IP address, and then we're gonna create network security group to be able to access IIS externally, just to test how it's running. But as you can see, the machine is up and running. So I'm gonna pause the video and then set up network security group, and then I'm gonna turn it back on so that we can test the settings. Thank you. So this is our virtual machine. So let me go back to IIS on the overview. So I click on the networking, and as we can see, there is no inbound rules and outbound. So we're gonna click on the interface itself, network interface, and then under IP configuration, we're gonna click on this IP configuration, and then we're gonna associate public IP address, the one that we had reserved, and then we're gonna save the configuration. So it's gonna take a few minutes. I'm gonna pause the video and come back. Okay, so we have now public IP address, as we can see on our VM. So we're gonna copy that. Well, actually we don't need to copy that. I take it back. Then we go back to our resource group, and then we created network security group to allow port from our IP address, to allow port 3389 from our IP address to the public IP address and to the private IP address of the VM. So what we're going to do, we're going to associate it with the network interface of the VM. So we're going to do that, and we're going to pause the video and then come back. So we had a little issue trying to connect to the newly IIS server, the one that we just brought in from the on-premises infrastructure to the Azure, and that was in this network security group issue. So what happened was there was inbound rule that actually destination was just that IP address, but it has to have from the source to the destination, and this is the port number. So once that is done, so we are able to connect to it. So we downloaded IIS server from Azure. and then we're gonna try to connect to it right now. So we're gonna do all it.local and then administrator, and then okay, and then we're gonna say yes, and then it's gonna allow connection there. So once we are connected, we can actually confirm that this is the server. And I'm going to open command prompt cmd. It's a little bit slower because we're using the low tier kind of application, but I'm going to do ipconfig, and then also we can actually see, so this is on the cloud app nap, which is Azure infrastructure, DHCP servers, and then DNS servers is also in Azure infrastructure. But this is the default gateway, and the IP address is here. So what we need to do now is we need to go to our domain controller, and we need to update the settings on the domain controller to reflect the IP address of our IIS server. But before we do that, we also have to enable in the inbound security rule for that particular server. We have to create a new inbound rule. So we have to create a new rule source. What we're gonna do, I'm gonna just specify my IP address, the reason being so that we can have a secure connection, because it doesn't have any source port range, destination. So we're gonna do any, and we're gonna do service, we're gonna do HTTP. Okay, so we're gonna allow priority port 80, IIS server. Okay, so we're gonna add that rule, so port 80. So and then we're gonna go back here, and we're gonna use VM. We're gonna try to actually do it by the IP address. So we're going to try to do it by the IP address. Of course, this no longer is available. So we're going to exit out of here. Okay. And this one is no longer available, right? Because we had not, the service shut down, on-premises service shut down. But let's look up the IP address of our server. So, and then we can do it by the IP address 84.178.143, and we're gonna just try to see if we can actually get access to it. All right, so this is a test page, and actually just to confirm, this is the IP address of our VMware, and I'm going to show it to you on the overview, right? On the overview, oh, I'm sorry, this is our IIS VM, so this is the IP address, public IP address of our VM, which is exactly what we're using here. But just to confirm, to make sure we are doing it correctly, what we're gonna do, we're gonna make a change to the local index file, right? So we're gonna open with Notepad, and we're gonna on Azure server, and we're gonna do break. Okay, we're gonna save it, and we're gonna go out of here, and we're gonna refresh it. You see, so it's looking on the Azure server, and as we confirm it right here, right here, the Azure server, I mean this server is actually connected on the Azure. So let's go to our DNS server, and let's try to change the settings here. So we're gonna change www from that IP address to our new IP address, which is located, a public IP address located in Azure. We're gonna say okay. All right, so now let's go to our test environment here, and let's do it by the IP address. HTTP www. allit.us. It might not work because we might have to flush the DNS records. But if it doesn't work, what we can do, we can just flush DNS records. It seems like it might be still looking on the local. So config flush DNS. Okay, config. Alright, so that one was flushed, so let's restart. Let's reload. Alright, so allit now it is viewable by the IP, by the domain name. So it's on the Azure server. So any changes we make to that Azure server will be reflected right there as well. So once again, what we can do, we can open with Notepad and on Azure server, and then we can do the update, right? So we can do h4, and we can do put a date 22. We can save it. All right, and then this is on the Azure server, and then once we refresh it, right, so the data is there. So that's conclude the way how you would migrate infrastructure to the Azure. Of course, you know, at this point we can go to our dashboard and we can go to our Azure Migrate, and we can either continue migrate other servers that are available there. You know, like let's say hypothetically if we need to migrate to Windows 10, and as we can see the data is refreshed, and then it even pulled in all the applications installed there because VMware Tools is also installed. And once you migrate all the VMs from the on-premises infrastructure, you can actually delete this project right here, and all the information will be gone. So hopefully it might be helpful to somebody who might be just starting migrating servers to the Azure infrastructure.